Hello everybody, welcome to the channel. I'm James, and yes, today is a nice rainy day. It's a perfect day to be building, to be set up here in the garage, working on the Aeromite, continuing on with this build. And in this video, or this step I should say, I'm going to be installing the engine, which is our OS 15LA, and also going to be installing, assembling and installing our small little tank here that I have from Sullivan. It's a little glow fuel tank. I'll go over that in just a minute. And then, like I always mention, you're probably getting tired of hearing me say this, but this is not a kit that you can go purchase in the store and build from a boxed kit. You have to build it off a set of plans. You can get the plans for free. Check out my introduction video to this build series, and I go over a couple different ways on how you can obtain the plan that you see here hanging on the wall. And again, you know, it's a great day to be building. It's raining outside, and I love the rain. We need it here in Southern California, so I'm glad it's here. I'm glad we're getting it today. And a few other things. This is going to be probably about the third to the last step in this build. I'm going to be installing the engine today, and then the next video or the next step of this, I'm going to be finishing up the electronics, putting in the receiver and the battery and that, kind of balancing out. And then that's about it. I'll probably do a test run with the engine, and we'll make sure everything is working properly, and then we're going to get out and do a maiden flight. Okay, so enough talking. Let's go ahead and get this engine installed. Okay, once again, this is our little OS LA15 glow engine. Two-stroke glow engine. I did a couple videos on this previously. This is a new engine that I purchased for this plane, and I did a break-in video of this, so check that out. I'll put a link at the end of this video so you can check that out if you want. And obviously we already set the plane up. I actually installed it. Well, I set it up for installation in an earlier video. I drilled out the mounting holes and such, so now it's just ready to be plugged in and screwed in there. So let me show you the hardware I'll be using for that. So to mount it, I'm going to be using these M3 socket cap screws. That's metric. And then I have corresponding, I have some lock washers, I have some flat washers, then I also have some nuts for that. And I'll probably just go ahead and put a little bit of Loctite on those to make sure that they stay on well. And then for the tank, you know, this is actually a pretty small compartment for the tank. I was hoping I can get a little bit bigger one, and this is a 2-ounce tank. And I'm not sure how long that's going to give me of a flight. I'll have to check that out, but I couldn't fit anything bigger in there. And yeah, just because of the size here, it's a pretty narrow area in there. So I was able to find this. I think I got this at my local hobby shop, which, by the way, they're sort of running low on stuff. I think they're sort of, you know, they don't have a lot of RC plane stuff anymore. I'm probably the only guy buying it. But in any case, so we'll go ahead and put this together. This is a Sullivan tank. You can probably still get this from Sullivan. Check out their website. And we'll assemble it, and then also we'll get this installed. And then the other thing we'll do is we will set up the throttle. We'll connect the throttle to the servo that I installed in the last step. The throttle servo is back in here. You can't see it obviously, but we'll hook that up as well. So I'm going to start by mounting the engine, and the first thing I have to do is take off the muffler because it's in the way of the mounting tabs on the engine. So let me pull this off of here. Throw that in here. Screws those down there. All right, so I have my little cap screws, and I'm going to go ahead and pull out my lock washers. I'm going to set them up with the lock washer. These little guys are very small. Get out of there. I'm going to set them up with a lock washer on each one, like that. And then I'm going to grab a flat washer. Just come out of here like so. And then I'll do the and then I'll do the opposite on the bottom. When these are in, I'll put a flat washer and then a lock washer, and then our nut will go on there. Just like that. And now I'll just go ahead and put each one in here. That one. Okay. All right, and those are now just set down inside there. Just flip it around here. Hold the engine so it doesn't pop out. Kind of want to show you, but I hope they don't fall out. Here we go. Hopefully you can kind of see those guys in there. Okay. We'll be using a small set of tweezers just to hold these washers as I get them on here. Just drop them on there like that. There's that one. Okay, so now I have all of the nuts installed, but they're not tightened down. And now I can just drop, I'm going to do a little drop of my thread locker on here from Loctite. And I'm going to put a little drop on each one of those, and then we'll tighten them down. Boy, yeah, a little messy, but we'll clean it up. So let me go ahead and get these tightened down, and then we'll put this is the first nut, and then I'll put another one on top of that. All right, well, that's sort of a tight quarters to get those in there, but they're now, I have double nuts on there with the Loctite. Okay, folks, well, now it's time to hook up the throttle servo to the carburetor. To do that, I'm just going to be using this steel push rod or control rod here. It's threaded on one side, and on the threaded side, I have this little clevis threaded on there, and it's about halfway. You can kind of see it here. I got it going about halfway under the threads here. That gives me room, if I have to be able to move this in and out to make some adjustments. And this is going to be the side that I connect to, or these clevis is going to be what I connect to the actual arm on the throttle, because it's kind of skinny and it fits in there nicely. On the other side, that's going to connect to the actual servo arm, I'm going to use one of these easy links from Debro, these little plastic easy links. These are very simple to use. That's one reason I like to use them. All you have to do is put a little L bend or a 90-degree bend in the control rod here, and then they just clip on. So I'll show you how that works in just a minute. So the first thing I need to do, though, is this is going to be too long, so I need to measure it to the right length. So I'm just going to insert it here into the fuselage approximately where it needs to be, like this, and then we'll flip it over and we'll take a look at where it lands for our servo here. So let me go ahead and move some things around. I'm going to have to hook up my servo to my receiver so that I can get it centered to make sure that it's in the right location. Okay, so I have the throttle servo connected, and now I have it set to where it needs to be, so I'm confident there. So now I just need to go ahead and put a mark on the control rod where it's going to engage the servo arm. So I need to check it up here at the throttle to make sure it's in the right location, and then we will come back here and we will mark it. So let me connect it to the throttle up here, and then we'll come back and we'll mark it on here. So again, because it's a small plane, I don't have a lot of working area in there, and my hands are too big. I'm going to try to get this clipped on here. You may not be able to see much of that, but let me go ahead and get this clipped on. Let me grab a screwdriver. Let me rotate this around here. See if I can get in here with the screwdriver and kind of open that little clevis up. There it goes. Pop it down on I'm going to put it on the outer one. There it goes. Oops. Okay, and what I can see here is that it's actually, the clevis is actually hitting the heads of those screws down there on the mounting tab. That's kind of weird. I mean, boy. All right, so I'm going to have to go ahead and just move that up to the next hole. That's a little strange. You think you'd have enough room. Oh well. Let me pop this off of here and we'll try it again. Okay, well that's better. That's kind of weird. I mean, I know those cap screws are a little high, but boy, I didn't think they would be hitting like that. All right, so I'm connected to the throttle now. And let me get in here and kind of clip this closed if I can. Nice thing about having the clevis screwed on this side is that I can just take it off the servo and screw it in or out, and I don't have to take it off of here to make any adjustments. And there we go. Now we'll go ahead and flip it over and connect the servo. Okay, so if I pull this all the way back, that's going to be my closed position, and the servo arm is set right here on the closed position. So I just need to mark that with a pen. Let me grab a pen. Okay, so now I just need to carefully mark it here on the control rod, and I'm going to go for the outer hole to start with, and I'm going to mark it just a little bit on the inside, sort of on this side over here, because what's going to happen is you bend that into a 90-degree angle, it's going to have a little bit of a curve in it. So it's not going to be like a straight kind of sharp 90 degree. It's going to bend, it's going to have a little bit of a curve in it by the time it gets down to that 90 degrees, if that makes sense. So somewhere, I'm going to mark it right about here. And of course, like I said, I can always make an adjustment at the throttle side. I mean at the carburetor side. So I'm going to try to cut it and then also make the bend while it's still connected here. I could take it off the carburetor, but then I'd have to kind of struggle to get it back on there. So I'm just going to try to do it this way. I'm going to go ahead and start with sort of a long cut here to kind of get this big piece out of the way. Like that. And now I need to go ahead and put a 90 in there. So let me grab another set of pliers. Okay, there's my mark. Hold this very tightly as much as I can here and just give it a nice bend. Actually, that wasn't too bad actually. You want to give yourself a good, make sure it's 90 degrees. Like that. Okay. And now we'll get our little connector here. And these guys are really cool. I like these a lot. These are very easy to use. Just put it on here. That's kind of rough here. Let me go ahead and get this sort of filed off here real quick. Okay, so now we can just go ahead and plug that into the servo there. Now, when I push down on this, it should go in, but because it's kind of coming up on an angle, it has to kind of pop down into it. It's sort of, I don't want to bend or break that little servo arm as I put it in. So I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect the servo arm from the servo real quick, and we'll put it on there, and then we'll just go ahead and attach it back. I probably moved my servo a little bit while I do this, so I'll check it. All right, so let's go ahead and put this dude on here like that. Okay. And then we'll go ahead and do our little clip here. This goes on here. Like that, and I just swing this around and clip it on. And I just flip it over. And there we go. Let me go ahead and turn on my servo again so that I don't get it misaligned. There's that. So that should be good there. So I think I have plenty of throw on the servo here. So let me flip it over. We'll take a look at the carburetor side. Probably just have to reduce my throws on this. And now using the endpoint adjustment on my transmitter, I can now set my endpoints. I'll just kind of guess where it should be. I'm going to open up my throttle a little bit here for the idle setting. Right about there, I think. And then I'll open it up full throttle here, and now I can go ahead and adjust this one. right about there. And now there's no binding. Okay, now we can move on to our fuel tank. So this is the tank that I'm going to be using. This is a Sullivan tank. I think you can still get these. Check out Sullivan's website. And it's a 2-ounce tank, and it's a round one, and I had to get this one in order for it to fit inside that small compartment up there for the fuel tank that I have. So let's go ahead and pull this out. I don't know if it was $2 or not, but this one was at my local hobby shop, and again, they're sort of running out of stuff over there for kind of RC building and stuff like this, but I'm slowly buying up all their stuff over the years. In any case, there's some instructions here, and let's go ahead and pull this out. This is for a glow fuel tank. Looks a little old, but I think it's going to be okay. A little bit of staining on there, but it should be all right. There's the actual tank, and then here's some kind of advertisement. Here's one tube here. Let's pull this out. They always give you a lot of hardware here, which is nice. Here's some brass tubing. We'll take a look at that. Here is our clunk. Here is the rubber stopper. Still seems to be pretty good. Here's the screw, and then what happens is these all go together. This is sort of the assembly that holds the stopper onto the end of the tank here. Now this tank has a little kind of bubble up here, so the vent line is going to go up and kind of bend into that, and it's going to be like this in the airplane, and that's going to give it some room for the little vent pipe to actually not get sort of caught up or plugged up against the base or the wall of the tank here. And here's a nice diagram in the instructions, kind of just showing what I just talked about there. Here's the clunk. It says solder on there. I'm not going to be doing that. And then here are the fittings. And here is the rubber plug here. There's the screw goes through this plastic piece, and then it screws in this little plate here. I'll show you here in just a minute. But then here, of course, is the diagram of what it's going to look like when we're finished. We have the little vent line going up here. And then, of course, we have our clunk down in here. Now, this has 3 holes, or the ability to have 3 sort of tubes in it, if you will. And that would be, so you'd have your line that goes to your carburetor. You'd have the line that goes to the muffler, which acts as 2 things. It acts as your pressure into the tank when the engine is running, and then also when you're fueling the tank up, it allows air to escape out of the tank as you're filling up the tanks. So it's a vent as well. And then the third line would be a fueling line, a dedicated line to fuel the tank up. I'm not going to do that, actually. I'm just going to use 2 lines, and I'm just going to fuel up the tank by just pulling the tube off of the line off of the engine itself and fueling it up from there. So the stopper, as you can see here, doesn't have holes all the way through it. It has the holes on this side. And the reason they do that is just for that, because you can have the option of having 2 or 3, so they leave them all plugged for you. So what we'll do is we'll just have to poke one of those. We'll poke 2 of those out, and we'll leave one of them solid. So I'll start by inserting the brass tubing into the rubber stopper here, and we'll see if we can just push it through gently. There's the first one, and then I just need the other one. Go. All right, next step would be to put our retainer on here like this. And this guy is going to slide over these guys. Oops. That. And then the screw goes in through the front here. Actually, I think there's not a hole there. Let me see if I can push it in. Now here we're not going to actually screw this in very tight. We're just going to get it to kind of engage that little plate back there. Something like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just align this so that this one will be, they'll have one up that's high like this, and that'll become your vent. That'll bend up into that little bubble up there. And then this one will come off and just be the drop down for the clunk. So we can start by cutting this one off for the clunk. And then it's helpful to have a set of little needle files like this. And here's the round one, the little rat tail one. You kind of work it in there and get the burrs out, and we'll clean out all the little cuttings and stuff. You could do this with like a little hacksaw or something also to cut these. You could use kind of like wire cutters, but that would crimp it. You'd have to then open it back up and be careful there. But if you don't have a roto tool like this or some other tools like a saw, like a little hacksaw, you can always cut it with a pair of wire cutters, but again, you're going to have to kind of open it up carefully. And then you don't want to leave any sharp burrs or ends on this thing, because over time that could cause it to sort of cut through the tubing. So you want to work a little bit to sort of smooth and kind of round off the edges here. You want to make sure you blow all the little shavings and such off of this before you do the final assembly, to make sure you don't get any little shavings in your engine. So now I'm going to have to just sort of estimate where this top vent one is going to sort of make its curve up into that little bubble, and also how far I need to go. It's a little bit of a trial and error process, but I'll do my best to get it close. So, and again, you want this one up on top, like sort of like here. When it's all assembled, it's going to be in like this. You can really hear that rain out there. Okay, carefully, I'm going to bend this up. So I'm going to try it about there. And then I'm going to cut it off. I'm going to estimate right about there. Now we can try to do a little test run and see if we got it close. See it up there. So sometimes that little rubber stopper, you know, it's a tight fit and it can get kind of caught up on, again, a little bit of flash or burrs on the actual plastic itself. So I'll kind of smooth this out a little bit to help with that. And blow it all out. And we'll see here. There it goes. Okay, you can kind of see my little vent line right there. Looks like you probably need to reduce that just a tad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it a little bit more. that, and I'm going to cut off a little bit from the end. And we'll try it one more time here. Okay, that's better. You can actually kind of see it in there nicely. Good. All right, so let's pull this out, and now we can put our clunk on. Push this through a little bit more. It can be sharp, so you got to be careful. That. And now we can put our little line on here. Push it all the way down. Again, inspect it very closely to make sure you didn't cut it. And now we can estimate how far we need to cut the tubing. And of course, you want your clunk to be in the back. You don't want it, and it needs to be able to move freely back here. It needs to be able to flop around and not too close to the back, because you don't want it going up against the back of the tank and getting sort of obstructed. But you also don't want to have it way far back here, because then you won't be getting all the fuel you need. So you do really want to make sure you get it really close, but not up against it here. So we will now estimate where that would be. Let's start right here. There we go. Okay, and I can tell right now that I'm a little bit too close to the back. Grab a flashlight, maybe we can see it in there. Yeah, you can probably see that it's sort of bent in there, so it's a little bit too close. So I'll pull it out and I'll cut a little bit off. Try it again. Okay, I think that's going to be pretty good like that. Could probably push it in a little bit more to get it a little bit further back, but I think I'm very close. So I can take this right about there. Very much a trial and error process for me. Okay. Now we can tighten this guy up. Now, one thing we need to be careful about when we tighten this up is that we don't rotate it as we do that. So we want to hold it nicely and make sure that it doesn't do that. So we'll get the screw set in there. And you want to make sure it's nice and snug. Obviously it's plastic, so you need to be careful when you're screwing this in, but you need to get it snug enough so that you don't get a leak. That's the worst thing ever. I think it's pretty good like that. All right. Well, guess what? You know, the tank doesn't fit. It would fit in here, but it's going to get, this is too long with these tubes coming out. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up a little hole or a big hole right here in the firewall, and so we can plug it in like that, hopefully. So the reason I don't know this, or didn't know this until now, is because I didn't want to take the tank apart and everything before I did it on the video. So I was a little concerned about it, but I think it's going to be okay. We will put a hole in here and hopefully be able to plug this in into there. Okay, well, I can imagine what you're thinking. Like, what the heck? But you know what? I don't think that is actually a big deal. This happens a lot. You know, when I'm building, I need to make adjustments, and this just didn't fit. I could have taken it out the back way this way and kind of put it in this way, but I think I have a lot of strength up here still, and oops, and I still have this piece up in here and this whole piece down here, and the engine is mounted on the rails down below, so I don't think it's going to be a big problem to have that sort of hole in the wall like that. And so now I got to do is I got to just be careful. I got to clean this out. I got to vacuum out. I'm going to blow it out with some compressed air and get all the dust out of here, and then we'll come back and we'll get the tank mounted. All right, this is a lot better now. Okay, very good. And I'll just push this back right here. Now what I need to do is I need to make sure I secure that tank in here. It's very loose, and I need to make sure it doesn't get in the way or vice versa of that throttle push rod over there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a method that I like to use a lot when I'm building these planes, and that is to use an insulated foam material. So I've used this a lot in my builds, and this is just this name brand is Foamular. It's by Owens Corning here, and it's just a small piece. It's a 2x2 panel I got at my local hardware shop. This is just an insulated foam material. This is what you would use for insulation on your house, and you can buy it in small pieces, you can buy it in big pieces as well, and it's actually very, very cheap. And the thing about it, the reason I like this stuff a lot is because it is very versatile. It is stiff. It's not like that kind of popcorn type of foam that's soft. It's very stiff. You can carve it, you can saw it, and you can shape it into pretty much any shape you would like. And you can use this to do things like make little cradles and such. You can glue it. I usually use on like an epoxy, or you can just jam it in places. You can make little wedges and stuff out of it and jam it in like where your battery pack is. You can cut out little pieces. It's really great for stuff like that. So in any case, I really like it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this material here, and I'm just going to sort of fashion or kind of construct some type of a cradle, or just maybe just put some pieces here on the side just to keep this tank up and away from that control rod down there. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm making some measurements. I'm just going to cut some small pieces out here, and I'll just show you how I'm going to do this. Again, it's just sort of a little bit of a trial and error process as well. I'm going to put a little piece sort of in front of the tank to keep it up against, keep it kind of back away from the firewall. Just kind of push it toward the back to kind of secure it in that sense. So I'm just going to cut a small little piece out of here. Okay, well, I think you get the picture here. So, this is actually a very simple way of doing things to keep things sort of secure. If it works for you, try it out. And I'm not going to glue in, I don't need to glue in these front ones, and I don't want to do that because I need to be able to get the tank out. But this side one here, I will glue this one in with some 5-minute epoxy because that's just kind of pushing the tank up against this side over here, and really it can't go anywhere. But I don't want to be, I need to be able to get the tank out. I can cut this stuff all out. It's just this foam. It's easy to work with. I can always put new pieces in if I wanted to. So I could glue it in, but I'll just leave these front ones as they are. They're not going to go anywhere. They're going to be held in by the top here. And then of course this one will be secured with glue. Then I'll just use my 5-minute epoxy. And yeah, this stuff is great. Like I was mentioning, you can use it to make little battery trays. You can use it to make little pocket or something for like maybe your receiver. You can use it for all kinds of little applications inside of your fuselage. And again, light, strong, workable, and highly recommend it. So try it out. I don't need a lot of this, so I'm just going to mix it right on top of my piece here. That's pretty good. Let's pop it in here. So now I can go ahead and hook up these lines. And one thing I realized, and you may have picked up on this before I did, was that I mounted my engine, but I have no way of getting, well, I had no way of getting to the screws that attach the muffler, at least for the front one here. So I had to put a little hole, a little access hole on the side right there. No big deal. That will work like that. So now we can go ahead and put our muffler on. It's going to be a little tricky. It's always a little tricky with cowl areas, It's sort of like I could have had this whole thing opened up and made it a little bit easier, but I like sort of trying to cover the engine a little bit. I just like the way it looks. I don't like the fact that these are sort of Phillips head or cross top screws. I wish they were socket kind of cap screws. I can always change them out later, but all right, so that's on. And now we'll cut some tubing and we'll come back and connect our lines. Okay, well I grabbed some silicone tubing for glow fuel, and I need to attach it down here first onto the tank. Then it has to make this curve and go down on here. Gotta be careful not to pinch it, or to cut it, or to crimp it. And for this one, I'm going to use a little bit thinner tubing just because I think it may be a little bit easier to work with. The thicker tubing was needed on this one because the thin one will kink easy. If it's trying to like make a curve, it doesn't make good curves. This one won't need as much of a curve, I don't think, so it's a little bit easier to use. It's not as stiff. So let me go ahead and try this one. And we'll just cut a piece right about there. Use my hand. There we go. I think I'm going to try moving this underneath the other one to keep this other one from being right on the engine and the cylinder head like that. I wish they didn't have this little fitting coming off the needle valve going straight up like that. It kind of makes it a little bit difficult. Kind of weird. I don't know if this will help or not, but we'll try it out. Something like that. We'll see what happens. I may have to do some kind of thing to secure this back here. I'm not sure, but we'll try it. And now for my prop, I have a little spinner nut for the OS engines. This should fit the 15LA, at least that's what it says. Let's try it out. I can go on here. There you go. And now for our little hatch. Well, all right, everybody. So we got the engine installed and the tank installed and hooked up. We have the throttle servo set up and connected to the carburetor, obviously. We have our prop on and our little spinner nut attached here, so things are looking pretty good. You know, it's always a little bit tricky for me working with small planes like this to get everything to fit properly in such a small space, but it works out. You have to change things here and there, but overall I think it's going to be okay. So yeah, so that's going to be about it for this video. Now the next step in the build, it's going to be one of the final steps, is to install the electronics, the rest of the electronics, the battery and the receiver, and we'll also check the balance. And yeah, we're getting very close to the maiden flight on this, so stay tuned for that. So like always, I always appreciate you watching my channel, and we will see you next time.